you remember our conversation about the first episode? We were talking about Game of Thrones a lot. That was most of what we had to go on. But we were saying that the feel, the pacing, the character work in that first episode really felt like Game of Thrones to us. And it was only after that episode, with the subsequent pilots and time jumps and shifts, that we developed this feeling of what House of the Dragon was like. And with all of this talk of season 2, going back to peak middle seasons of Game of Thrones, I thought they accomplished some incredible magic sleight of hand thing over the course of this episode, where it started with me expecting those House of the Dragon jumps and settling in, but by the end of this episode, I felt like I was watching Game of Thrones. I wrote down some of the echoes. We've talked about pacing for weeks, and I thought this shift fully materialized here back to Game of Thrones, that peak Game of Thrones pacing, where yes, it moves slow and it moves with its characters, but it's heavier. It's Dark Souls. It's dragging a 10,000-foot sword.
Yeah.
It is that Luke scene with Rhaenyra, where he's nervous and he says he's not perfect like she is. The silence, the emotion, the space that they had in that scene, where you know it's going to be important. I assumed he was going to die after getting that scene. But that is an early Game of Thrones character moment. Those little beautiful moments of family that made us all want to die for the Starks. We got to watch how slowly information moved. We saw Viserys' death hit 2 episodes later. We heard about the coup of the Greens reaching Rhaenyra. There was so much talk of ravens being sent out, of envoys being sent out. It reminded me of Ned and Catelyn finding out about Jon Arryn's death.
And we heard about all the different houses and the Starks and the Baratheons and the Tullys. And
it reminded me of information hitting Jon at the Wall chapters after it gets everyone else. And the last thing that really hit me was all of the scenes of someone, a monarch who's trying their best and you know they're doomed, hunched over a war table. Totally. It was Robb Stark. It was Stannis Baratheon.
Yeah, and not only that, a parent, right?
Yes.
Because again, you know, just like we saw with Robb Stark, with this time with Jacaerys. It's Jacaerys' idea that the brothers go and act as the envoy for Rhaenyra. Right, and so you see the children inheriting the battles and the sins of the father and mother in this case, right, and ultimately faltering. And we saw that happen royally here, but Luke seemed to understand that there was some gravity towards these responsibilities and these actions. You could see it in his face, and he took it all seriously. Like, in my mind, I was like, oh shit, if this is me, I'm gonna go ahead and betroth myself to one of these, you know, one of the Baratheons while I'm here. But he was like, no, I'm betrothed to another.
Yeah.
You know, honorable until the end, and he did his duty. He was scared whenever he saw Aemon, but like, shit, who wouldn't be?
But he didn't surrender. He didn't throw away his principles.
No.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And he did everything that he could, the best that he knew how, and he still failed.
Yeah.
And that is the game of the essence of Game of Thrones.
Yes.